Crystal unexpectedly becomes a member of the Silvercrest PAC's elite training program, but she isn't interested in the spot because she knows it's her cousin Kat's dream. Now she has to face Kat's anger and her own guilt. Thank you for your subscription and likes. What would you do if it were you? You can leave your thoughts in the comments section 7. I already told you, dude. I don't know. I let out in an exasperated tone. Chris' face implied that he didn't believe a word I was saying. Well then how did this happen? What did Beta Bridget say when you talked to her? Chris asked. I didn't miss the dreamy look he got on his face when he spoke her name. Oh boy. She didn't say anything. I responded. I left out the part where she was absolutely no help at all. Just that I'm now a part of the AAP. I let out a sigh after the words left my mouth. I was going to be learning and training among the brightest and best of the Silvercrest youth. Cue humiliation. Well, it says here that you can quit if your reasoning is absolutely valid, or if one of the supervisors dismisses you. Chris spoke. I had given him the AAP handbook to study on my behalf because honestly, I still didn't want to believe any of this was real. I have valid reasoning. I didn't apply. I yelled. Okay, Miss Fussy Pants. Don't be mad at me. I didn't do this. I sucked in a deep breath. Sorry. I just really hate this. It's not all bad, you know? Chris shrugged. Sure, only one person actually gets to be an apprentice in the end. But the other candidates also have it good. The program itself guarantees you a stellar future. I mean, a letter from just one of the elders or pretty much anyone with enough high standing here could get you anywhere. You're the one always going on about Harvard being your dream school. Almost all the apprentices and candidates end up at Ivy League schools. The way I see it, if you play your cards right, you can actually get something out of this. I thought about that. I love Uncle Victor and Aunt Sarah. I love Parker and Hazel and Kat. But the Silvercrest PAC has just never been home to me. It's never felt like home and I don't know if it ever will. Roman was the only halfling I could really relate to here. Chris had both his parents here and Professor Tanner seemed to have achieved a sort of standing in spite of his differences. But Roman and I were outcasts. Not even our parents had wanted us, so they ditched us. Try not to feel alone in the world with that being your reality. And now Roman was gone. He had betrayed me and the entire PAC. I was alone and getting out of here was my only escape. But this doesn't feel right. I told Chris. We had finally approached the town center of Woodfell. All the stores were open and it was as busy as usual with life. I had never seen such an organized town place as the one in Woodfell. It was systematic like clockwork. Woodfell produced and manufactured most of its own things, so prices were low, and no one ever went without. Any excess foods or products were either exported or donated to PACs at war who were in need. I didn't work for this, Kat did. I feel like I'm taking a shortcut. I feel like I'm stealing her dream. Chris scratched the back of his head. Even he couldn't put a twist to the fact that Kat was probably mad. I mean, she even left school without us. We always walk home together. She'll get over it. Chris finally spoke timidly. He handed me the handbook. This is a great opportunity. I know it's not what you expected, but I think it's great. When Roman got the apprenticeship, sure I was happy for him, but I wasn't surprised. Roman has always been good at everything. But with you. He gave a shrug and a warm smile. I finally feel like I have someone to look up to. I couldn't help but smile at Chris and his words. Even if I fall flat on my face a billion times. He waved me off. Yes, you could fall flat on your face a trillion times and I'd still be rooting for you. He nudged me lightly. Kat is amazing. Even without this program, she will do great things, but let's face it. Opportunities like this don't just come to people like us. Promise me that you'll at least try your best. I smiled at Chris. Sure. But I want no photographic evidence of my humiliation. He rolled his eyes. You know I can't make such promises. Okay, I need to go now. Busy day at the bakery. He spoke before running off. Chris' parents owned the most popular bakery in town. It had been in the family for years. But having Chris' mother around, one of the only humans in Silvercrest, she kind of put a new twist to it. She's an amazing baker and her cakes are to die for. Even the werewolves who don't exactly accept humans and halflings can admit that much. I stared the rest of the walk home. I didn't know if it was just in my head, but I felt like people were definitely staring. Now why was that? Because of my association with the PAC's biggest trader or because of my new position? The list of things that were making me even more of a misfit around here was growing increasingly, and I hated it. I tried to keep my head low as I trekked home. Like many of the houses here, Uncle Victor built his house in the midst of the woods so tall trees guarded the surroundings. It was quite a change from where I grew up in cramped apartments in the busy city. Quiet, clean, and large Woodfell was a far cry. I soon approached the house. I found Hazel out on the porch with her best friend, Virginia. They had lemonade in front of them and glittery sticker books and seemed to be in a deep conversation about whatever 10-year-old werewolf girls found interesting these days. "Oh, you're back." Hazel spoke when she spotted me. There was this "you're in trouble" sound in her voice. "Hey guys." I greeted unsurely. "Oh, the nerve." Virginia spoke with a glare in her eyes, and yes, there was definitely some sass. What could I have possibly done now? "Look, I have had a long day, so we heard. I thought two-headed snakes were a myth, but then I met you." Virginia spoke. Huddled up. What did I do to her? I thought she liked me. Well, like is too strong a word, more like tolerated me. Everyone knows she has a little girl crush on Kat. She is basically her idol. Girl, chill. "Have you been watching The Real Housewives with your mama again?" Hazel asked. "You know it." Virginia answered. "I'm definitely coming to your house tomorrow," Hazel told her. "Totally, girl. Yesterday she even let me have a sip of her wine." "Oh, how was it?" Hazel asked in excitement. Virginia just shrugged. Knowing her mother, it was probably grape juice. "Okay, can someone please tell me what I did wrong?" I begged. This day had already been a lot. I don't think I could handle anymore. "You stole the apprenticeship from Kat," Virginia yelled, pointing an accusatory finger at me. "What? I didn't steal anything." "Who told you that?" "Kat, of course." Virginia crossed her arms over her chest. She tells us everything. We're BFFs." Hazel rolled her eyes. "Oh please, we overheard her talking to Daddy. She is mad." I huffed. "Great. Now the only person who I thought I would actually be able to vent to was mad. I'm going in. Pray for me," I told Hazel as I walked towards the door. "My money's on Kat." I heard Virginia whisper. I turned to glare at her. She turned around and was suddenly interested in her lemonade. I found Uncle Victor in the kitchen making waffles, Kat's favorite. Okay, she really was mad. "Hey, Uncle V." I greeted hesitantly as I walked into the room. He looked up and forced a strained smile. Someone had probably gone through a huge cat storm. "Hey, kiddo." He beamed. "How was school?" I rose a brow at him and his smile dropped. "Right." He wiped his hand on his Kiss the Cook apron. "Do you want to sit down and talk about it?" I shook my head. "I'm just really tired. Today has been a lot." I heard. He cringed. Congratulations." I shrugged and walked towards the island, picking out a strawberry from a bowl. "How bad is it up there?" I asked, gesturing upstairs with my head. "Well, we got past the screaming and the why is everything so unfair tirade." He shrugged. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen, I didn't even apply for the AAP." Uncle Victor nodded and then sighed. He moved towards me and wrapped his arms around my shoulders in a hug. "I know, Crystal, you would never do anything to hurt your cousin. And I know you have never even been interested in the program." "Thank you. But why doesn't she get it?" "Well, you have to understand how badly she wanted this. How hard she worked and trained only to have the one thing she really wanted given to someone who doesn't even want it." Uncle Victor explained. "I didn't want this to happen." I muttered again into his chest. "I know, sweetie." He sighed. "But don't feel too bad. This is a great honor and opportunity." I pulled away from him and looked into his eyes. But one that I didn't deserve. He gave me a small smile. When we were younger, your mother would always get all these amazing things she didn't have to work for. Everyone loved Teresa as a child, so she would get showered with toys and new clothes as a teenager. She didn't even have to lift a finger, and everyone followed her like she was some queen bee. He rolled his eyes, making me giggle silently. Uncle Victor and I had a mutual agreement not to talk about my mother, so he only brought her up when it was absolutely necessary. I always thought she was some kind of witch. But as we got older, I realized she was just blessed. We don't get a say in who God blesses, Crystal. Being mad doesn't solve anything. It just makes you miss out on the blessings you already have and are yet to receive. And in the end, I got to share in Teresa's greatest treasure. He squeezed me a bit tighter. "Kat will come around. And if she doesn't, I'll ground her." He shrugged. I giggled. No, you won't. We both knew that when it came to punishing the kids, Uncle Victor was a huge softie. Aunt Sarah was the one to really be afraid of. Now why don't you make the first step in extending the olive branch? He handed me the plate full of waffles. I nodded. Wish me luck. I'll do you one better, I'll pray for you. He told me. I sighed and started heading up the stairs to the room Kat and I shared. I opened the door softly. Kat was already covered up in her bed, but I knew she wasn't sleeping. Hey Kat, look what your dad made. I spoke as I waved the plate around as if she could see. She remained silent with her back to me. Kat. I tried again. Nothing. Come on, kitty cat. I spoke, trying out one of Chris' nicknames for her. She stirred this time, getting up slightly to glare at me. Don't talk to me. You're bunking with Hazel tonight. Her voice was cold and unforgiving. So much for Kat coming around. Crystal. I heard Hazel whine. What? I moaned in irritation, refusing to open my eyes. Your alarm. Huh. Your alarm is ruining my beauty sleep. Hazel screamed. I shot up from my makeshift bed on the floor of Hazel's 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐩 yellow room. Of course my alarm. Because apparently now I had to be at school 4 whole hours before everyone else. Life sucks. Sorry, Hayes. I mumbled as I scrambled off the yellow couch in her room. It was small, but even if I wasn't the tallest human, I still had to fold my legs. And not to mention it wasn't the most comfortable place to spend your night. I could have shared Hazel's bed, but I wasn't about to get bitten or clawed in the middle of the night by an adolescent wolf. You know, you could just tell Mummy what Kat did. Hazel spoke with a yawn. A yellow bonnet covered her head. The theme of her room and life was quite literally sunshine, much like her personality really. And make Kat madder than she already is. No thank you. I responded as I folded up the blanket I had been using and carefully placed it back into Hazel's closet. Not everything is about Kat, you know. Hazel spoke with a roll of her eyes. You're too young to understand, Hazel, but promise me, not a word to your mom and dad. She huffed. Fine. My lips are sealed. I smiled and placed a quick kiss on her cheek before rushing out of her room. I made my way back to Kat's in my room. Sneaking in was easy. Kat could sleep through a tornado, so waking her up wasn't something I was worried about as I rushed to take a shower in our bathroom. When I got out, all I had to do was get dressed. I had already pressed my uniform the night before, so all I had to do was put it on. According to the handbook, the appropriate attire for whatever training session was in store for us would be provided, so I didn't have to worry about that. I heard Kat let out a mighty snore as she turned over in bed. I wondered if I would have woken up early with her to get ready if she had been in my position. I probably would have, because I know she would have been too excited to function. Kat gets like that. After she handed in her application, she spent the entire night going over the what-ifs and the things she might have missed. As irritated as I was to have my sleep disturbed, I stayed up with her and listened to her rant because I knew how much it meant to her. If I could somehow switch places with her, I would do it in a heartbeat. I took my backpack and left the room. Better get going. Wouldn't want to make the grumpy twin mad on the first day. The worst part about all this was having to go through it alone. I bet if Roman was here, he'd already be outside the house with that stupid grin on his face. He would tease me about how something this absurd could only happen to me of all people, then he would formulate a game plan with me. Roman had been more or less my halfling coach around here, so everything I knew about surviving as a halfling had come from him. Just as I was about to sneak out through the kitchen door, I heard someone clear their throat. I turned and almost jumped out of my skin at the sight of a woman in a silk robe standing in the dark behind the island. I placed my hand on my chest. Aunt Sarah, what are you doing? Aunt Sarah rushed to me with a huge smile on her face. Sorry for scaring you, sweetie. But I knew this would be a huge day for you and I couldn't let you leave. I gave her a smile. Among everyone in the house, she had been the most supportive about all this. Last night, she even prepared this special celebratory supper for us with all my favorite foods. It was awkward to say the least. Kat didn't want to join us, but hell will freeze over before Aunt Sarah lets one of her children miss one of her meals. That or you have to be really sick. Conversation was kept at a minimum. No one could really say anything without offending Kat, so Parker just kept us entertained the whole time, as he recounted his day, which involved a lot of stories about how cutthroat the playground had become in kindergarten. The kid made his life sound like a gangster movie. Thank you, Aunt Sarah. I told her. She gave me a soft smile. How are you feeling? Nervous. I replied instantly. Afraid. And what do we say when we're afraid in this house? Aunt Sarah asked, and I felt like I was the same age as Parker with the tone she had used. God didn't give us the spirit of fear but of power, love and self-control. I repeated one of the mantras she had been instilling in her children since they could talk. Exactly. She beamed. Don't be afraid, baby. You're as capable as any of those other candidates. Thank you, Ns. I spoke before wrapping my arms around her in a hug. I guess it was unfair to claim that I had no one rooting for me. Oh, and here you go. She reached over to the counter and handed me a khaki bag. I made hash browns. There's no way you're going to kick butt on an empty stomach. I laughed. Of course not. Thank you again, Aunt Sarah. Don't mention it, sweetie. She rubbed my hand gently. I turned to leave. I'd like to say that with Aunt Sarah's reassuring words and her hash browns, I had a renewed vigor and whatnot, but the truth is I was still scared. And Crystal. She called before I walked out the door. Your mother would be proud. I fingered my necklace but said nothing. There was nothing to say after all. 9. The only thing worse than having to go to school, is having to go to school when the sun isn't even up. The minute I got to the gates of Silvercrest Prep, I had to show my student ID to the guard. We never did that during the day. Security measures, I guess. The guard told me everyone was already in the gym, so that's where I headed. When I got there, I opened the double doors, and just because, they decided to let out a huge screeching sound as they effortlessly swung open. Everyone immediately turned to stare at me. Oh great. I lowered my head and quickly walked in. They were all gathered in the center of the gymnasium. The candidates and two people I immediately recognized, May and Peter Sylvester. He had been the first winner of the apprenticeship under Alpha Tristan. I went to stand beside Allison. Hers was the most friendly face in the room at the moment. Peter gave me a stern look. You're late, candidate. I am. I asked hesitantly. The large clock on the wall read 5:01. Am. Well, 5:02 now. You are. He responded sternly. That's 3 points from you and your partner. My eyes widened. I looked at Joshua, who was standing off to the side with B, and he shot me a deadly glare. I stared at the ground and muttered a sorry. Sorry, instructor. Sorry, instructor. I repeated. I wanted to look to May for help, but her eyes were set in front of her in determination. What had I been expecting, though? Just because she had said she was looking forward seeing me here, it didn't mean I was automatically her favorite candidate. Peter took a step forward, his long and lean arms tucked behind his back. He wore all black with the silver Alpha's crest stuck to his chest. He didn't exactly appear as intimidating as you would expect him to be. If anything, all I could say was that he was kind of movie star cute. The kind of hot guy you would expect to play the nice boy next door in movies. The only thing that made him even the slightest bit intimidating was the slight stubble around his face, but other than that, he had smooth gingerbread brown skin and this clear green eyes and dimples. Dimples that formed with the slightest movement of his lips. Take candidate, he looked at me. Crystal. I muttered. Take candidate Crystal as an example. Tardiness will not be tolerated. Neither will disrespect. He strode towards me, stopping right in front of me. Didn't you read your handbook, candidate? You are expected to address your instructors by their proper titles. Oh right. I blurted out. I'm S and do not speak unless spoken to. He ordered. I heard a snicker come from my left and I knew it was Courtney immediately. Instructor Peter slowly turned off to the side. Something funny, candidate? He asked. That wiped the smile off Courtney's face. I fought the urge to smile in satisfaction. No, Instructor Peter. Courtney immediately responded, lifting her chin. Instructor Peter turned away from her. 3 points taken away from you and your partner too, candidate Courtney. Courtney gaped, but she knew better than to protest. Ha! Finally a place with equal treatment. I'm not running a daycare. This is one of the most advanced training programs you'll ever encounter, so if you know you're not up for it, leave. I looked up hopefully. But that also means admitting you don't want to serve your pack. He added. Way to guilt trip a sister. I frowned and lowered my head again. You're all here because you're believed to be outstanding in one way or the other. May finally spoke. But as talented as you are, we expect you all to work your hardest. You won't only be tested in terms of your strength and speed, but also your intellect, your compassion, your loyalty. We're training you to be in the Alpha's innermost circle. You will be trusted with the pack's deepest secrets and most daunting tasks. The question is, can you handle it? I knew the answer to that question, but no one seemed to want to listen to me. You'll find your training attires in the locker rooms. Get changed and meet us outside in 15 minutes. Training has officially begun. May spoke. 15 minutes later, we were outside on the soccer pitch in our training outfits, which were actually quite comfortable fitted black jumpsuits. I wonder how they knew our sizes. The suits were similar to the ones May and Peter wore. They were ever so slightly padded, and I knew there must have been a special material that they were made out of. I would research later on. It didn't take long for me to identify the partners in this situation. Mr. Grumpy Wolf Joshua was mine, but so far he hadn't said a word to me. He only looked my way to glare. He was probably mad about me losing us points already. There was Bea and Courtney, they were probably ecstatic about that. That left Allison and Andre. They barely spoke to each other, but they at least showed a united front by standing beside each other. That left me standing away from everyone else, looking isolated. Every morning, to warm you up a bit, we're going to start off with a little cross-country. Peter spoke. Here's the route, out the school gates, through the town and round back through the Belvedere woods. My eyes widened. Wait. He expected us to do that all without dying. I looked at the other candidates, but they seemed unfazed. Oh right, they all took the more advanced physical classes prior to this. This would be child's play for them. I am going to die today, aren't I? You have 20 minutes max, go. Peter yelled. Everyone sped off. Candidate Swan. Go, go, go. I didn't realize I had frozen in my position as everyone else went on their way. I quickly moved my feet as fast as I could. At first it wasn't so bad. I'm not an athlete in the least, but I have to say I was carrying my own. I mean, sure, I was dead last, but at least I had Allison in my sights running a few miles ahead of me. But then, whatever little adrenaline I had going for me immediately wore out and things changed. I won't say I got slower, let's just say Allison got faster, because in no time, I had lost her from my sight. I was suddenly grateful for this whole 3M training. No one else was here to see my humiliation. And most importantly, no one was here to see me stop by a water fountain and hunch over in an extremely unattractive way to try and catch my breath. I felt like my chest was on fire as I struggled to breathe. What was I thinking? I actually had hope in this program. I lowered myself to the ground. A small breather would do right about now. I couldn't help but feel humiliated. This was just the first task. The distance was long, but for a full werewolf who had been constantly training, it was nothing. I don't despise my human side or anything, but it really does have its downsides. Hey, what are you doing? I heard a voice yell. I looked up and saw Mr. Grumpy Wolf himself. I wanted to reply with dying, but judging by the look on his face, he probably wasn't going to appreciate that response. Everyone is already back at the school, get up. You heard the man, Crystal. With all the strength I could master up, I pushed myself back up. At least my breathing had somewhat stabilized, but there was a sharp pain in my side now. If I was expecting a medal for this small act, I was very disappointed. Joshua just looked irritated before turning around and breaking out into a jog. Come on. I tried to move my feet again, but I just couldn't do this running thing again. I can't. I called out in a small voice. Joshua turned around. What? He growled. I mean, I'll meet you back at the school. You don't have to wait for me. I thought I saw a vein twitch in his forehead. I was at the school. Everyone got tired of waiting for you, and as your partner, I was sent to see if you were still alive and bring you back. Really? Everyone was already back at the school. Wait, how long had it been? I sighed. How humiliating. I broke out into a jog before finally continuing with a steady pace as I ran. I could hear Joshua behind me. He could have easily overtaken me, but he didn't, and I knew that probably infuriated him all the more. When we got back to school, everyone was gathered on the football pitch. The candidates sat by the bleachers and the instructor stood beside them. Peter was checking his clock just as we ran in. Joshua finally overtook me and headed straight to Bea. I, on the other hand, was fighting to keep myself from collapsing as I lugged myself to sit next to Andre and try not to look like a sweaty, out-of-breath mess. May looked sympathetic. Peter had no expression on his face as he said, 45 minutes 30 seconds. Let's work on our speed next time, shall we? He didn't say my name, but it was kind of obvious. I saw B whisper something in Courtney's ear and they both smiled coyly. Okay, now that we've tested your speed, it's time to test your strength. Everyone up and get over to the gym. It's time for phase 2. Peter yelled. What the actual? There was more. Everyone begun to get up. Andre turned to me. Dude, you need to get in shape. No kidding. I just forced a smile. He got up and held his hand out for me. I took it and let him pull me up. He jogged off to catch up with Allison. I thought everyone was gone until I heard a voice speak. You know it gets worse if you give up. I jumped slightly at the sound. I turned to my right and saw May. She gave me a soft smile. I wasn't kidding when I told you that everyone here is the same. The amount of hard work is what determines whether you make it or not. Remember that. With those words, she walked away. I sighed. Keep going. Just keep going. Everyone kept saying it, but they just didn't realize how hard it was for me. Keep going, Crystal, just freaking keep going. I learned 2 things from my first morning session for the AAP. 1, I am not fast. 2, I am not strong. 2 things I was actually quite aware of before actually. I've never been the athletic type. But I was always decent enough to not get picked last in gym class. Well, that was before I came to Woodfell and started at Silvercrest High where their P.E. felt like I had gone to military school. And those were just the regular classes. Kat took the more advanced physical classes. There was Class 1, which I was in, the rookie class. Class 2, Class 3, which I guess you could call junior varsity, and the best of the best, Class 4, Kat's class. The second portion of the training was to test our strength, and while all the other candidates did more than the bare minimum, I was left in complete humiliation as I struggled with the challenges instructor Peter offered. I now get why being a member of the program requires you to have a minimum of a B in Class 4 PE. If the instructors thought the running was bad. At some point, Instructor Peter even let me stop earlier than the rest, probably because he thought I would hurt myself. It's honestly a miracle that I didn't. I walked to my locker too tired and sore to mind that people were still staring and whispering. In addition to the physical torture, we got our AAP IDs. They were supposed to reap a whole lot of benefits, but I honestly hadn't gotten to that point in the handbook yet. And while my peers proudly wore theirs, I hid mine in my backpack. The last thing I wanted to do was flaunt it. Hey, how was your first day? I had hardly shut my locker when Chris appeared, looking giddy. Horrible. How do I sign out? I spoke as I slammed my locker shut. Chris shook his head. Come on. Couldn't have been that bad. I completely humiliated myself. I whined. At least no one saw. Oh please, I bet B and Courtney are spreading my humiliation like the gospel as we speak. I doubt that. The handbook said candidates are expected to be discreet about training. They're not supposed to really talk about what happens. Remember how tight-lipped Roman had been about his training? That was true. You'd think he had a secret girlfriend with the way he hid things. At some point, I stopped seeing him much of him because training took up most of his schedule. Would that become my life? Would this training consume me and my life? That's if I made it that far anyway. But Roman was in his 3rd year of the apprenticeship, so it really wasn't the same, and besides, he would always find a way to make it up to me. God, I missed him. Let's not talk about Roman, please. I told Chris. He must have seen the sadness in my eyes because he got this sympathetic look on his face. Sorry, sir. Everyone was sorry. Sorry or mad. It's either they felt sorry for the poor young thing who had been manipulated by the Pax trader, or they downright hated me for just being associated. It's okay, let's just head to class. I told him. This was supposed to be the part where Kat would say later, nerds, because we hardly had any classes with her. How long was she going to be mad at me? Luckily, Chris didn't ask questions. He probably understood that the last thing I would want to talk about was something else that would make me upset. Is Kat still mad? Or not? I give Chris way too much credit sometimes. I sighed. She's a ticking bomb. Everyone is walking on eggshells around the house. Wouldn't want to set off bomb Katerina. Huh, that's actually a good nickname. I'll try it on her when she has been detonated. Chris winked at me. I rolled my eyes but giggled. Hopefully sooner than later. I muttered. There was an ache in my neck from Hazel's sofa. Hey. Chris suddenly trailed off. Joshua Melrose, 12 o'clock. I looked ahead but didn't see Joshua anywhere. The other 12. He hissed before spinning me around by my shoulders. Hey. Joshua let out as more of a grunt. Hey. I replied, feeling confused. Why was he talking to me outside training? And where was his girlfriend? I thought they were joined at the hip. Joshua didn't even spare Chris a glance. Rude. Hey Crystal. Michael Melrose's head suddenly came into view over Joshua's shoulder. He had a huge smile on his face. Ah! Chris yelled in fright before throwing his arms around me, nearly knocking me down. My hero. Michael frowned. He scratched the back of his head and leaned back. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Joshua spun to glare at his twin brother. I thought I told you that I would meet you in class. He spoke through gritted teeth. Michael gave him an equally fixed look, and I thought I told you you can't boss me around. And besides, he shot me a not-so-discreet look. You need me. He spoke in a low voice. No, I don't. I'm capable of being. Michael suddenly gave him a fixed look. Joshua suddenly let out a sigh. He turned to face me. He seemed to not know what to say. I shared a look with Chris. Okay, this was strange. Crystal, I expect you to come over to our house tonight after training. What? I asked. What? Chris spoke right after me. He still had his arms around me. I shook him off. Michael slapped his forehead. He looked at his brother like, dude, really? Did Joshua Melrose just ask? No, demand that I go to their house after school. Why? Michael stepped forward towards me. I tried not to look too uncomfortable at his proximity. He smiled too brightly, and I couldn't help but make a distinction. There was the way too happy brother and the grumpy one. What my brother is trying to say is, he saw you struggling today during training. I was so glad my darker complexion didn't allow me to blush. I knew he didn't like me, but going around telling people that I was struggling. It was only his brother, but still. It was equally embarrassing. Who knows who else they could have told. I looked at Joshua and there was no expression on his face. Oh no. Don't be mad. Michael suddenly yelled. He just wants to help, so maybe you could come over to our house and you could train together. I looked at Michael, then Joshua, then Chris, who just shrugged. As in just me. Alone. Michael looked confused. Yeah, unless. He looked back at Chris, the friendly look on his face suddenly disappearing. Do you want your boyfriend there? Boyfriend? Chris and I yelled simultaneously. We looked at each other, both in disgust. So you're not dating? His smile returned. I looked at Chris again. How was my love life any of Michael Melrose's business? He didn't know anything about his brother and I, right? Tristan promised that it was just between the two of us. And Bridget. What if the brothers found out somehow? I didn't like this suspicious behavior. Why was Michael Melrose suddenly interested in me? Why was I getting invited to their house? I don't know. I responded. I don't think that's quite a good idea. We're offering to help you. Joshua suddenly spoke in an annoyed tone. I appreciate that, but I don't trust you. Joshua turned to look at his brother as if to say, I told you so. Whatever. Just find a way to pick up on the physicals this week or we'll both suffer. He turned to leave. Come on, Mikey. Michael was still staring at me with a hurt look on his face. I felt really bad as he slowly turned and followed his brother. Dude, you just turned down the Melrose twins. Chris spoke from beside me. I sighed. What did you expect me to do? I don't trust them. Well, Joshua is your partner this week. You'll have to trust him whether you like it or not. I guess you're right, but don't you find it weird the Michael is suddenly being so nice to me? Chris rose a brow at me. What? I asked. Chris shifted from one foot to the other. I know Kat has kept you in this bubble of, everyone's the enemy but us. But Michael Melrose is actually a decent guy. You won't see him sitting with us bottom feeders at lunch, but he's not. Well, he's not like B and Courtney. How do you know that? I asked Chris if he wasn't with Kat and he was off somewhere being a loner. I've lived here almost all my life, so well, I've never said this because I love Kat and all, but it seems kind of hypocritical that she would paint her old friends out to be the enemies when she was once one of them. I stopped in my tracks. What? Kat had been friends with the popular crowd. I guess that shouldn't have really surprised me all that much. Kat meets the criteria and probably surpasses it. But she has never mentioned anything like that. As in B, Courtney and the twins. I asked. Yep. Chris responded nervously. What happened? I asked. Other than the fact that they're raging jerks. You'll have to ask her. I shouldn't even be telling you this. Chris responded. I knew how much it probably took to betray his precious Kat in the first place. Wow, I wonder what other huge secret she kept from me. I muttered. Don't be too hard on her. To be honest, she's given a lot of things up for you since you got here. I spun to face Chris. Given things up for me? Like what? Her room. Chris sucked in a deep breath. She's going to murder me for saying this, but yeah, ever since you got here, she had to accommodate another sibling and share her parents. She had to give up the apprenticeship, her friends, and Roman. 11. Roman was never the type of guy who flinched. The first time I met him, he had come over to the house with Uncle Victor. At the time he was working for him. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I remember not knowing how to describe his beautiful skin. His complexion was more tan than Kat's but lighter than mine. It was so flawless, with only a few freckles sprinkled around his nose. It made him all the more gorgeous. He always kept his hair short, but even at the length it was at, you could see the deep coils in it. And his eyes, they first met mine where I was seated on the patio swing, reading a book. They were gray and they looked like they held a beautiful storm. Are we even supposed to describe storms as beautiful? Because that's all I can come up with. Uncle Victor introduced us for the first time. I remember Roman smiled at me. It was the kind of smile I hadn't seen in a while. That, I'm genuinely happy to meet you smile. I didn't know how important Roman would be in my life. I couldn't foresee all the storms he would bring along. I can just tell you Roman has always been one of a kind. When people tried to pick on Chris and I, he always stepped up without a second thought. When he asked me out, he did it without even missing a beat. And even when I suggested to him that the age difference might be a problem, he immediately set up a meeting with Uncle Victor and Aunt Sarah to explain his intentions. When his name was called out for the AP candidacy during assembly, making him the first ever halfling to become a candidate, he didn't show any fear as he walked up to the stage. The first time he kissed me, he did it so surely, like he knew how crazy I was about him, and that there was not a chance in hell that I would ever refuse him. When he betrayed the pack, I'd like to think he was as sure as he always was even in such a moment. He had been acting completely normal earlier that day. He came by to the house and we hang out before he had to go in for work. Next thing I know, I'm hearing that he was stealing pack information and had fled before anyone could catch him. He left just like that. And he took my heart with him. The most painful part is that I thought I knew him. And there was never a day that would go by when I didn't find myself trying to come up with a way in which there must have been a misunderstanding. My Roman would never commit treason. He would never be the person they told me he turned out to be. I trusted him with everything and I thought he trusted me too. The only person I trusted more than Roman was Kat. Even when we fought and argued, I could count on Kat. She was the sister I never had. But her and Roman. Why the heck didn't she tell me? Why did they both tell me? I would do anything for Kat, and if she had told me about Roman, I would have backed off and chosen her over him any day. I felt betrayed and hurt. I carried my anger with me as I made my way to the classroom where our second session of training for the day would be held. The school was mostly empty and also quiet because almost everyone had gone home, as I should have as well. I was exhausted from the morning workout and the day of learning. Thankfully, the second session of training was more based on theory than anything else. We had 3 lessons in total: spiritual and moral affairs, social and development studies, and international relations, each taken by a different member of the Alpha's council. For spiritual and moral affairs, we had the assistant spiritual advisor to the Alpha, 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐿𝐢. He was pretty chilled for someone who was taking us in one of the most important aspects of the apprenticeship. He was young too, just in his early 30s. His lesson was actually really easygoing, and even though I hadn't necessarily grown up studying the Holy Scriptures, I had been learning them the minute I moved in with Aunt Sarah. She was determined to have all her children grow up with the word in them. Following Mr. 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐿𝐢, who preferred that we just call him Terry, was easy enough. The spiritual and moral affairs class was necessary for us because it provided a base in which we would learn to make sound decisions based on the laws of old, and the things considered morally upright. It mainly dealt with studying the good book and learning from it. Then there was social and development studies, which basically dealt with pack affairs in our territory. We studied the basic internal affairs that kept the pack running, the businesses, power and water sources, relations among the members and all that. It was probably the most involving. And none other than Headmaster Forbes took us in this one. He was a bit more serious in his teaching but nonetheless fair and impartial towards students. He moved at a pace we all followed, and he allowed for questions where we weren't clear. Finally, we had international relations. Being such a dynamic course, it was divided into 3 components that 3 different people would be taking us in. Instructor May would take us in the history of international affairs, Instructor Peter in the current international affairs, and to my great delight, Mr. Tanner in human and werewolf relations. Instructor May was starting us off. She was okay, it's just that she was basically a walking textbook and expected each of us to be one too. The classes were all okay, I guess. I really couldn't complain. Theory classes have always been my thing, and I had a feeling they're what I'd be looking forward to the most. I knew they wouldn't be easy though with how broad the syllabus was. I could tell Allison and I were really the only ones enjoying it because we were really the only ones answering and asking questions, especially in Instructor May's class. She had just been wrapping up the lesson when Andre raised his hand and asked a question that I'm sure had been on most of the candidates' minds. This is cool and all, but when do we actually get to work under Alpha Tristan? I looked at her expectantly. While I'm sure everyone was anxious to get right into the action of the apprenticeship and all, I personally wasn't. Being around Tristan had been awkward since I rejected him. It's not like I was around him a lot though. We were in the same pack, but he was like the president around here. I saw him at PAX social gatherings, but I didn't seek many private audiences with him. In fact, the number of times I had even found myself alone with him were countable. What we had was a secret I wasn't willing to share with anyone. How we met was a story precious to me, but one I would keep locked in my heart. And how we parted was just as painful, but no one would ever know that, probably not even him. Parting with someone you know was designed for you is probably the hardest thing you could ever do in your life. But it needed to be done. He just doesn't realize it yet. May started packing up her books. Well, you officially meet the Alpha this Saturday at the AAP ball. Whispers of excitement spread around the classroom. I had totally forgotten about that. The AAP ball was held at the Alpha's manor to officially welcome the apprentices and to introduce them to the society. As if everyone didn't already know. It was honestly just an opportunity to brag and show off in an extravagant way. But May continued, you don't start working with him until next month when you all prove yourself worthy.
𝐿𝐲
That sucks, the last interns got to work with him in their second week. I saw May's eyes look at me then quickly shift away. Well, the rules have changed. No awards for guessing Y or OMAN. That's not even fair, half the class has already met him. Doesn't that give them an unfair advantage? My heart started beating faster until I realized that the half he was talking about was Josh, B, and Courtney. There's no such thing as favoritism with the Alpha. You either work hard or you get booted. No in between. Josh spoke in a low voice, narrowing his eyes at Andre. Whoa, that sent chills through me. The class was silent. Even May gave Josh a look that said, chill bro. Okay. May cleared her throat. Class dismissed. And don't forget to read up on the origin of human and werewolf relations. Everyone started getting their stuff and leaving. I thought I'd be able to talk to Allison after class, at least to make a new friend, but Andre swooped her away immediately. Josh, fall back, will you? May spoke, hardly looking up at him. Josh, who was about to head outside. He glared in my direction and I honestly wanted to raise my hands and say, I haven't done anything. He kissed B's cheek before saying goodbye to her. If they didn't despise me so much, I would have awed at that. I let Courtney and B leave the room first before I did. The last thing I wanted was drama after this long and tiring day. When they walked out, I counted to 10 before following. The hallways were still lit but completely deserted, and as strange as it seemed, I felt like for the first time in a long time I could breathe. No one was watching. Not Aunt Sarah and Uncle Victor, who have been walking on eggshells around me since summer. Not the multitude of students who saw me as an outcast and as an accomplice to the PAX traitor. Being alone with God and my thoughts was really what I needed. I looked up at the ceiling and sighed. Does it get better, big guy? I wasn't expecting an answer. But I was too exhausted mentally and physically. I kept walking. The last thing I needed was someone finding me in the hallway talking to myself. I used the back exit because at this hour, I knew the front gate would be locked. The back exit went through the soccer pitch, which was perpendicular to the northern forests. As I walked down the concrete footpath that separated the forest and the pitch, I couldn't help but wonder why it had been declared out of bounds. Sure, some of the things that used to happen there were questionable, but it was all good fun. I heard once some of the seniors from the previous year threw a party so wild, A fire almost broke out. Could be a lie, I really wouldn't know. I've never been invited to a party here. But I bet Kat had, since she apparently once used to run with the popular crowd. I could just imagine her sitting at their table laughing at their jokes. I wasn't jealous. Just confused. Kat could have told me about this, couldn't she? Why did she stop being friends with them? Other than the fact that they are kind of awful. And don't even get me started again on the Roman thing. I suddenly heard a ruffling sound in the woods. My head whipped to the right. It was probably just the wind. I kept walking, but not even a few seconds later, it sounded like someone, or something, was running. Okay, nope. I have seen horror movies. This is not how my life will end. It hasn't been too impressive thus far. I started running from what? I really didn't know. I had almost reached the end of the pitch when I realized how ridiculous I was being. There was nothing chasing me, and I was honestly too sore to be running. I looked back. There was silence. See, Crystal. Nothing to worry about. Stop acting crazy, girl. I straightened my school blazer and kept walking like a civilized young lady. Crystal. Now I didn't imagine that. I quickly turned around towards where the voice had come from in the woods. I would recognize it anywhere. Roman. I whispered. I walked towards the thick foliage. Roman. I whispered again. I looked around the pitch to see if anyone was coming. I'm going crazy, right? I'm exhausted and I'm going crazy. But there's really only one way to know for sure. I started walking towards the woods. If I die, I would have never tried to make those Nutella chocolate chip pancakes Kat and I have been planning to make. Sweet, sweet chocolate. Wait, maybe they have chocolate in heaven. They just have to, right? I heard another sound, then I saw a light. There was definitely someone there. I walked faster. Or what are you doing here? Not Roman, definitely not Roman. I stumbled back as I was met with the furious faces of what looked like, judging by his black uniform, one of the pack's soldiers. It's after hours. Do not make me ask you again, miss. What are you doing, Raphael? What's going on? Another voice I would never miss anywhere. Now I was really in trouble. The Raphael guy turned around and offered a slight bow. I'm sorry, Alpha. It's just an unruly student. I'll take care of her. Tristan walked out of the shadows of the trees, his eyes glowing green slightly. I could tell he had just shifted back from his wolf form. That, and the fact that all he had on was a pair of loose shorts. This man was planning on killing me. I tried to avert my eyes. No, I'll handle it. He spoke. I knew his eyes were glaring daggers at me. Really, Alpha, it's just... I said, I'll handle it. Authority radiated from his voice, and I knew the soldier wouldn't dare question him. Go help the others. The Raphael guy bowed again before immediately scrambling away. Tristan's eyes became fixed on me. Oh, didn't you ever read the story about Little Red Riding Hood? Or watch any horror movie ever made? You never, and I mean never, go into the creepy woods alone at night. Tristan growled as he walked towards me and grabbed my arm, dragging me away from the woods, back towards the school. We're werewolves, Tristan. We're supposed to be in the woods. I told him as I yanked my hand out of his grip. He glowered at me. The northern woods are out of bounds. I thought I already made that clear. I wasn't about to tell him I had heard someone say my name. And not just someone, the one person I knew he would murder on sight if he saw him again. Wait, something suddenly didn't make sense. Why? I blurted. What? He asked in confusion. Why are the woods suddenly out of bounds? And why are you here in the middle of the night, Alpha? What's going on? Did you join a midnight nature club I don't know about? The almighty Alpha of this here pack actually froze. I'm the Alpha, Crystal. I don't have to explain anything to you. Is something happening? I continued. Tristan looked away as usual. He looked irritated. Go home. I grabbed his arm. Tristan. He looked down at my hand on his arm and I could feel him tense up. I felt the sparks too. I quickly pulled my hand away and looked down. It gets worse the more you fight it. I heard him speak in a low voice. I looked up at him and opened my mouth, but he beat me to saying anything. I'm not suggesting anything. There was no emotion on his face or on his voice. I'm just saying, if you insist on fighting this, you might want to abstain from touching me. My cheeks heat up and I knew he could tell. He suddenly got a faraway look on his face and his eyes flashed green. I need to go. I'm serious, Crystal, straight home. With that, he turned around and ran off. Thank you for being of totally no help, Alpha. I sighed and gave one last look at the woods. It was nothing. I was thinking too much. And all I needed right now was sweet, sweet sleep. 12. Do you need a breather, princess? I heard him speak with a chuckle. I stopped walking and crouched down to place my hands on my knees and catch my breath. Oh, shut up. I huffed. I was sweaty, my bones were aching, and I'm pretty sure the humidity was making my hair frizz up. I would have a full-on fro by the time I got back home. I told Kat straightening my hair for my date with Roman wasn't necessary. I never straightened my hair willingly. And I especially wouldn't have let Kat torture me with her flat iron if I knew Roman's idea of a date was hiking up the highest mountain in Woodfell. You're not human, are you? I asked him. It didn't make sense, we were both halflings and yet, he was built like a fully fledged werewolf. Roman smiled and repositioned the backpack he carried before walking up to me. He crouched down and gestured for me to get onto his back. Come on, lazy bones. I'd like to say I acted all strong and told him I would be strong and endure. But nah, I shamelessly jumped on his back and gave his thigh a small kick. Giddy up, horsey. I'll try not to be too offended by that statement. He muttered before he broke off into a light jog. This apprenticeship training is really paying off, huh? I told him, gawking at how much stronger he had truly gotten since he had got accepted into the AAP. We're being taught that our human bodies are only as strong as our wolf bodies. He told me as he continued up the hill. Which is why I didn't want us to come up here in our wolf forms, even if it would have been much easier. I grumbled. It would also increase the chances of me seeing you naked. And I promised Victor and Sarah that I would treat your body like a temple. I won't dishonor you in any way. My cheeks heat up and I didn't know if he could tell how embarrassed I was or not. Well, thank you for caring about my purity. I mumbled. Too bad you didn't care enough to not bring me up here. I'm going to be so sore tomorrow. I whined as I leaned my head on his shoulder. You'll be fine, princess. And really all I'm trying to do is make you fitter. You sound like Kat. I groaned. Why can't y'all just let me be lazy and fat? 'Cause we both love you too much. Yeah. Likely story, buddy. He chuckled again. He kept jogging in silence for a few more minutes before he finally came to a stop. He set me down and turned to beam at me. Now tell me, princess, tell me this wasn't worth the hike. He moved from in front of me and gestured ahead. The mountain dove down into a slope that extended to pretty much nothingness. Not bad nothingness though. Just Silvercrest territory that hadn't been touched yet. No buildings, no nothing, just thick nature in its rawest form. We were so high up, we could see up to the end of the Silvercrest territory, which was marked by a narrow canyon. Okay, you were right. This is beautiful. I sighed as I took in the breathtaking view. An eagle flew right past us and settled on a rock not too far away. It's really beautiful. Roman came up behind me. Yeah, we came here just last week for our AAP hike. I turned to look at him and rose a brow. I thought you weren't allowed to talk about to AAP business. He wrapped his arms around me and looked down into my eyes. I'm not. But this was something I couldn't not share with you. He spun me around in the other direction. This is the greatest vantage point for the pack. You can see over our whole territory from here. If someone was to try and attack, the Alpha would know immediately if he had someone up here. Yet there's no one up here. I told him. Yep. What a flaw. Roman muttered. I tried to tell the Alpha about it, but he brushed me off as usual. I don't think he likes me too much. He laughed as if it was the funniest thing in the world. I tensed up. Why do you think that? Roman shrugged. He treats me pretty much the way everyone treats me around here except with him. I don't know, babe, I just know the guy hates my guts. Of course he hates your guts. You're with his mate. That's what I wanted to say, but of course I didn't. I spun around to face him again and picked his nose. Paranoid much? He bit at my hand playfully so that I would take it away. You don't see the way he looks at me. I had a good idea of what that look might look like. Whatever, we didn't come here to talk about Alpha Tristan. I came to show you this. I looked around. I never failed to be stunned by how large the Silvercrest territory was. Why though? I suddenly asked. Roman looked stunned. What? I probably sounded like the most ungrateful girlfriend ever. Why show me this land that will never truly belong to us? We're the outcasts, remember? Our plan is to leave Woodfell. Roman's gray orbs got this faraway look. We can have anything we want, Crystal. I can give us anything we want. Even Silvercrest. He whispered the last part. I looked up at him and he was lost taking in the territory, as if he was actually planning on taking over it. I laughed and pulled away from our hug, hitting him playfully. Okay, but before you start your plans on world domination, can we eat first? I'm starved. You better have packed the good turkey sandwiches. I walked over to the backpack he had abandoned on the ground. I was too busy spreading out the picnic blanket to notice that he was staring at me. Crystal. He spoke my name. I saw the intent look he had on his face. Yes, 𝐊𝐬. I mean it. I can give you everything you've ever wanted. I smiled. That's nice, baby. But right now all I want is to eat. Get over here. Looking back at that day, the biggest mistake I made was not taking Roman seriously. 13 Tristan. I was beyond frustrated as I emerged through the thick foliage of the woods once more and appeared in the backyard of the manor. Bridget was standing in front of the back door holding a pile of folded clothes. When she spotted me, her eyes dimmed. She was mad. I told you it's no use. If he was here, he's long gone. She spoke. I growled and remembered I was in my wolf form. I was always more comfortable in my wolf form. Everything was sharper, everything was clearer. Basically, most of my problems could be solved when I was in my wolf form. You have to meet with the defense wing in an hour, Tristan. You might want to turn back now. Bridget spoke. I detected the annoyance in her voice. I could tell I had been frustrating her all evening by constantly brushing off her suggestions. Another of my favorite parts of being in my wolf form is that I couldn't talk to people in their human forms. The water in the pool rippled with the winds. You're ignoring me now. Well, I'm that you're mad because nothing went right. I hate to tell you this, but maybe if you had just listened to me and not acted impulsively. Bridget, turn around. I need to shift back. Bridget gave me a cold look but turned her back to me anyway. No, I couldn't speak to people when they were in their wolf forms, but all wolves of the same pack had the ability of communicating via telepathy on the condition that the other party was willing to let the other inside their head. It was more common in the olden days, but in our time and age where secrets were prevailing more than ever, hardly anyone used it. Bridget is my beta, so of course she had no choice. Almost everyone in the pack had no choice if I requested them to open their mind to me. As the alpha, I had the right to my pack members' information, but I would never invade someone's privacy for my own selfish gain. I felt the warmth that accompanied the shift, and soon instead of 4 limbs, I was on 2, and the absence of fur made me more aware of the chilly weather. Clothes. I communicated telepathically, not ready to exchange actual words with her just yet. She tossed them over her shoulder. First the shirt and then the boxers, followed by the pants. Can we now talk about your reckless behavior earlier? She begun. I rolled my eyes just as Bridget spun around just as I was finishing up by throwing my shirt over my head. She narrowed her eyes at me. Oh, real mature. I sighed as I walked past her and into the house through the back door. Maybe next time wait a bit longer before you catch me half naked. Nothing I haven't seen before. She spoke with a slight smirk. In all honesty, Bridget didn't have to open her mind up to me. We already knew each other inside out. We had been friends since we were born. Our mothers were best friends. We even used to take baths together. Choosing her to be my beta came almost instinctively. I'm serious, you need to answer my questions. Captain Park is going to ask the exact same ones. We'll tell them what happened. There was a security breach and I took action. I told her as I navigated the hallways and made my way to the kitchen. That might work on them, but let's talk about what really happened. You were on your way to do your weekly spy session on Crystal and you thought you saw Roman. I scanned the refrigerator for the leftovers from the meal the boys must have had for dinner, and I ended up taking out a plate with a turkey leg and potatoes soaked in gravy on it. I don't spy on her. I muttered gruffly as I took a fork out of a drawer. I keep an eye on her. Bridget crossed her arms and stood across from me by the island. Potato, potato. I chose to ignore her. It wasn't her business after all. And I know it was the traitor. He didn't have a scent. Halflings don't have strong scents like werewolves and humans. It's frustrating. Especially since Crystal rejected the mating bond. I really have no way of tracking her in emergency situations. Okay, let me rephrase. We can't tell them you thought you saw your failed mate's lover. I stabbed the fork into the turkey leg. I know what I saw. Roman is back. Bridget rolled her eyes. He would be an idiot to come back. The punk is smarter than you think. How do you explain the strange behavior in the northern woods? Horny teenagers. Bridget responded. We were in high school not too long ago. You know what happens in those woods, Tristan. I'm not being paranoid, Bridge. I know Roman is back. He didn't get what he wanted and now he's back to finish off what he started. Bridget was silent for a while as I chewed. I looked up at her. A quiet Bridget was never a good sign. What? I demanded. Her lips formed a straight line. He's back to finish what he started, huh? And what is that, Alpha? The way she said Alpha was mocking. The rest of the pack info or Crystal. Don't start. I told her. Sometimes I wish I never had Bridget open her mind to me after I named her my beta. It's then that I dove into her mind and discovered her greatest secrets, including her crush on me. To say I felt the same way even before I met Crystal would be a lie. But I couldn't deny that at a point, I had come to decide that marrying Bridget would be the most convenient thing to do. She was one of my closest friends, someone I could trust with my life. My parents had adored her. She was great in combat. I believe she could even take me on. She was knowledgeable about all aspects of our pack. She was the perfect choice at some point. At least that's what I thought before I met Crystal. No, let me give it to you straight. That's why I'm your beta, right? Because I'm honest with you no matter what. I knew she would keep talking no matter what I said, so I just sat down and focused on my meal. You're acting like a paranoid boy, Tristan. Having someone who was working right under your nose bruised your ego. And now you're working overtime to get back your glory. But such recklessness and childishness is not expected from an alpha. I didn't like Roman from the beginning, I admit that. But my hunch was right in the end. He was trouble. I responded calmly. If there's one thing I had learnt from growing up with Bridget, it's that if you raised your voice, she raised hers, and she was never one to lose a shouting match. She placed her hands on the island's surface and leaned forward. Oh, don't act all high and mighty. The issue here wasn't that you got a bad vibe from the kid because he turned out to be a spy. You hated his guts because he did the one thing you failed to. Get into you precious Crystal's pants. I swept the plate off the island and shot up. I clenched my fists tightly. I could feel my temper rising. Boundaries. I let out through gritted teeth. There are some things I don't let even Bridget say to me. She took a step back. That haughty, self-righteous look was still on her face, but I could tell she knew that she had crossed a line. All I'm saying is that it's inevitable. You don't want to hear this, but it's my job to tell you this. I said it in the beginning, Captain Park said it as well, and the whole freaking town is probably still thinking it. Your precious Crystal might still be in contact with Roman. She might be a spy as well. I growled at Bridget. Watch your mouth. She was scared now. I could tell. No. She continued. Crystal was his girlfriend for 4 years. You can't tell me in all that time she didn't uncover his secret. You might not want to consider this, so let your right-hand woman do it for you. She was interrogated and investigated over and over again in the most thorough ways. I spoke up. Putting her through all that was the worst thing I ever did. I knew she was innocent, but everyone else was still suspicious. If she had just accepted the mate bond and let me tell everyone about us, she would never have had to go through all that. I would have protected her like I've always wanted to. As you said, Roman was smarter than he seemed, and whoever he was spying for must have known what they were doing as well. Keeping Crystal innocent in all this would be the smartest strategy. She's not a spy. I told Bridget. Every hypothesis requires an experiment, T. You believe she isn't, so prove it. Have someone tail her like I wanted to do initially. We're not spying on her. I told Bridget point blank. She let out a humorless laugh. Like you haven't been doing so all this time. I didn't spy on Crystal. That would be invading her privacy. Honestly, I just checked on her from time to time. Okay, Romeo, don't think of it as spying. Putting a tail on her will also ensure her safety. If Roman is really back as you suspect, he'll want to see her. We're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I thought about it. Bridget was right. If the traitor was back, I know he wouldn't be able to resist seeking out Crystal. It was the one sure way of catching him. Fine. I finally relented. Choose someone we trust. Bridget knew what I meant. The list was pretty short. The only people who knew about me imprinting on Crystal were Bridget and my 2 apprentices. Speaking of, I needed to talk to them about how she was holding up with the apprenticeship program. How she had gotten on that list was still a mystery to me, and I really hadn't had the time to look into it with everything going on in the pack and with the Werewolf Union. Why couldn't the packs just make my job easier and freaking get along? Okay, I'll get right on it, Alpha. Bridget smiled. She was way too happy about this. I didn't like this at all, but I knew she wouldn't find anything. Hey bro. My mind had been so preoccupied, I didn't even hear Joshua's footsteps as he walked into the room. Josh, you're still up? I asked. My little brother walked into the room. His eyes found the plate on the floor, which was shattered now, but he didn't say a thing. Yeah, I was studying. May gave us a boatload of work today, he explained. And I thought you'd be home earlier. You were supposed to hang with Mikey and I, remember? I cursed internally. Right. I never thought I would have to schedule time to hang out with my own brothers, but that's what life had come to now. Sorry, Jay, I guess it slipped my mind. Something came up. I saw the disappointment on his face. It's cool. He shrugged. Mikey was already fast asleep when I got back from school anyway. He only woke up because Violetta made him eat supper. I smirked. As if Mikey could ever say no to food. Let's just hope his mate won't have such a huge appetite, or else we'll never have food. Joshua spoke. I chuckled, but soon there was silence. An awkward silence. I knew what this felt like. It was what started happening between my own parents and I when the war just begun. It was just like this. We went from hanging out all the time to them having to schedule in time for me. It was even worse for the twins because they never saw them at all. I even joined the Pax Army just to be closer to my father and my mother. With my father being the army commander and my mother being the Alpha. The twins lost their parents at too young of an age. And I feel like they didn't get to spend enough time with them. When I became Alpha, I promised that wouldn't become me, but I didn't know what I was signing up for. Being the Alpha wasn't an easy task. It required all your time and attention, especially if you didn't have a spouse by your side to share the responsibility. I was only 17 when my parents died and I had to become Alpha. Just a year younger than the twins are now. I never wanted what started happening between my parents and I to happen between my brothers and I, but it seemed to already be beginning. Joshua had joined the AAP, I suspect, to be closer to me. Michael was a bit more relaxed. He has always been a goofball who doesn't get too affected by things. But I know the distance between us is affecting him as well. He was quieter around me. As quiet as Michael could be anyway. How's the apprenticeship program going? I asked, breaking the silence as I leaned on the island. When I first saw Joshua's name on the list of approved candidates, I was pretty skeptical at first. I had to grow up at a young age and I didn't want that for him and Mikey. But I figured they would have to learn the ropes of the Alpha title eventually. After all, they would have to take over in any case if anything ever happened to me. I would have preferred they both join the program honestly, but I wasn't going to make Mikey do anything he didn't want to. Besides, Mikey was still doing pretty well in all his advanced classes. By the end of the term, he would be ready to start getting involved in official pack business. Okay, I guess. Joshua shrugged. I mean, it was just the first day, so I guess I can't say much, but it's cool. The only problem I'm really facing is my assigned partner. That halfling girl from school, Crystal. Hey J-Man. Bridget spoke, breaking the silence. She walked towards Joshua and threw an arm over his shoulder and started leading him out of the room. Why don't you show me what May has you reading? I swear there are always loopholes with May's teaching techniques. I can show you some. I rolled my eyes. You're not supposed to do that. I called after her. Ignore your uptight brother. I heard her tell him before they disappeared further into the hall. I sighed. I took a cup and filled it up with water from the tap. As I drank, I looked out at the quarter moon in the starless sky. Bridget might have called me out on being paranoid, but I know I saw Roman. He was back. I was sure of it. Why did I have a feeling that something bad was about to happen?